Welcome back to Movement Professional. So today I want to do a video where I'm using the pelvic model to clarify a supine hamstring stretch, either on the back with a strap or using a wall, and try to connect it to what's going on at the pelvis and hips so that we can understand how, if there is a stretch that you're continuously feeling but you're not feeling that you're making much change there, how we might have to think about it differently and how we might have to direct the action a little bit differently by thinking about the pelvis first. All right, so the equation I like to think of when I'm talking about any type of joint mobility is posture plus breath control plus direction will equal the mobility that you're looking for. So if we feel a stretch, and in this case we're talking about a stretch in the hamstring, which is the back of the thigh, the attachment point is the sit bone here, and then there's several attachment points, but basically we're going to get onto this shin bone here. So the hamstring as a whole, it flexes the knee, but then it also extends the hip, so it moves it this way. So in order to stretch something, we actually have to move things in the opposite direction. So we have the knee straight, we extend it, and then we flex the hip. So typically when we're trying to stretch a hamstring, we're thinking about bringing the thigh bone into a 90-degree position at the hip. So 90 degrees of hip flexion, which ends up getting the leg to here, which if we do this against the wall, our goal would be to look something like this, where the back of my thigh is on the wall and this other leg is flush with the wall too, and the rest of me is in contact with the ground. So that's sort of what we're going for, but tension on the back of the leg and also limitations at the hips and pelvis will tend to get in the way of us being able to get there. So as we're limited there, how we have to think about this is we don't want to just feel the stretch. If we just feel the stretch, we're going to be like a dog chasing your tail. It'll be tension in the area, and the tension will continue to be there every time we come back into the exercise unless we understand the direction that we're trying to go. So if we look at the mobile pelvis here, one thing that has to happen when we're on our backs is we have to make sure that we keep the pelvis stationary while we move the thigh. So one thing that happens very commonly as we start to feel a little bit of tension in the back of the leg, the pelvis will start to orient in different ways. So it may turn away, right? So now this is my pelvis orienting to the left. Now my leg kind of looks like it's going a little bit higher, but nothing's really happening in the joint. I'm just turning this way. So practically, we have to think about keeping the back of the belt flush on the ground, and then we just move as far as we can move here. So not worrying so much about how high the leg gets, but worrying just, okay, is my the back of my belt flush onto the ground? Once we hit a limit, then the other thing we have to think about is if the pelvis, so if I show it from this angle, if the pelvis is a little bit flared out this way, it's like the two bony prominences are open like a book there, that's going to start to direct the hip socket out a little bit wide. So now instead of it being a pure plane up this way, we're still going to feel a stretch, but it's the leg is going out a little bit more. So we actually have to hit that wall and then now breathe in a manner that compresses the pelvis. So on an exhale, we're thinking about these bony prominences coming in this direction as much as they can while the back of the belt stays on the ground. All right, so that's part of the thought process there. So we need what's called hip internal rotation. We need this socket to be more turned in as opposed to flared out to get this pure plane of joint range of motion that we're looking for there. All right, and then the last thing to think about is from a direction standpoint is if this feels tight, we're actually going to have to do some work to direct it in the direction we want to go. So we can do that by thinking about the hip flexors that will pull this leg here. So that could be feeling like your deep abdominal muscles are actually working to try to pull things that way. Or we can think about creating a little bit of strength. So if the hamstring is taking some tension on the stretch, we could push back into an object. So if I'm here on the wall again, I have a couple options of how to direct this. So one, let's just say this is my range of motion. I can't get any closer to the wall right now. First thing I have to do is think, is the back of my belt flush to the ground? I'm not tipped up one way or orienting the other way. Are my feet in line with my knee as much as possible? So if I don't want to be turned out too much, or that is, again, the pelvis flaring out. So I have to be able to square up, keep my back flush. Now, if I want to direct me towards the the hip flexion that I'm looking for, I could try to take my foot off the wall, which I feel my quad doing that. I also have to keep my abs as tight as possible, keep the back of the belt as flush as possible to the ground. And this feels like work. So it's a stretch, but I'm also doing a lot of strength work to try to not lose my position and take the leg off the wall. If that feels like too hard, or I'm getting a little bit of cramping on the front of the hip flexors there, it can work well to also push back into the wall. So now I feel the back of this leg engaging on getting stronger there. And then I can relax, and then I try to move a little bit closer. And now I'm gonna feel more work that has to happen. There's more tension here. So that might even bend my knee a little bit if there's a lot of tension here. So I prioritize what's happening in the middle. The belt is into the ground. Exhale in a way that squares me up even more. I'm gonna push into the wall, and then if I can try to straighten the knee as the last thing I do, that's gonna give me more tension there. So I'm working harder into the stretch for about 10 seconds, and then I release. And then I can try again. If I have any more give, I wiggle forward. I'll let the knee be a little bit bent. I focus on what's going on in the middle, and then I'm gonna try to direct the heel into the wall, the knee towards straight. All right, and I'm trying to actually fight into that stretch a little bit. I'm trying to work into that. So over time, as I do this more and more, I will get improved stretch tolerance, but I do want to feel like there's a little bit of a battle going on within whatever my current tolerance is, that I'm not just trying to find a stretch, but I'm trying to understand the direction that I'm trying to go to. So in this case, it's trying to get my butt to the wall with my legs straight. So I have to try to use the muscles that straighten my knee and extend my hip into that position. Hopefully that brings a little bit of clarification to the idea of what's happening when you're trying to stretch that hamstring. If not, feel free to ask another question. See you next time.